Hello, hello! This is Astrologer and Hypnotist Evelyn Zuel, and this is the Mystic Parlor. Welcome back. We are going to talk about the month ahead, the Astro Weather Report for October 2023. And October is a big month because we've got the eclipses, and we have a couple of other big aspects happening to look out for. But most importantly, of course, is the big eclipses happening. The eclipses affect everyone differently. However, everyone will have some kind of epiphany, shifts, or relationship changes that affects them very deeply. So, let's get into it. The ingresses. First, I want to go over all of the ingresses that we have this month. October 4th is the first ingress, which is Mercury moves into Libra. When Mercury moves into Libra, the communication styles that we've been experiencing in Virgo shift from the analytical and data-driven and detail-oriented Virgo types of archetypes and experiences into the Libra balance. So we need to hear what other people are saying. We're more interested in other people's opinions. We want to know what other people are thinking before we go ahead and make up our own minds when it comes to our Mercury experiences. October 8th, Venus ingresses into Virgo. Virgo is a sign that is focused on all of the properties around critique, analysis, the small details. And when Venus is in there, it means that the way that we're going to be analyzing our aesthetic is going to be with a very critical eye. Venus represents, as I just mentioned, aesthetics, relationships, other people, how we balance ourselves with others. And when it goes through the super critical processes of Virgo, we're going to be more susceptible to noticing where some of our relationships don't completely add up in our eyes. We might be a bit more critical of the people of our relationships, just more poking into and nitpicking the small little shifts and changes and everything that we notice that is different between us and other people. We may be much more aware of our differences with others as well when Venus navigates Virgo. But also with Venus and Virgo, we're going to be a lot more focused on how we look and the way that we show up and present ourselves. So we might be more critical of our appearances and wanting to change or just kind of fluff up our image. Also with Venus and Virgo, we may notice where we fall short when it comes to our projects and our passion projects. So we're going to want to work a bit harder at making things look more beautiful. We are going to have a super critical eye when it comes to how things look. And so this is a wonderful time for graphic designers, for people who are in business, who maybe want to elevate their marketing or their image or their social media, just to create more continuity within their content. October 11th, we have Mars entering Scorpio. So Mars is at home in Scorpio. Mars is a traditional ruler of Scorpio. In contemporary or modern astrology, Pluto is the ruler, but we all go both ways. Mars is the planet of action, war, passion, initiation, and how we move physically through the world. And when it's in Scorpio, it's going to be much more discerning and slow and very specific with movements, not wanting to waste energy, but use energy in a way that is very beneficial to us. When Mars goes through Scorpio, it means that the fight energy that we have is way more impactful. We might feel as though we are taking things more personal. When Mars goes through Scorpio, we're not as willing to collaborate with other people as it was when Mars was in Libra. We're not really willing to think about or listen too much to what other people's opinions are when it comes to our own actions and what we have to do. When Mars is in Scorpio too, it's a powerful fighter. Mars in Scorpio is very, like I said, kind of particular about what actions it takes, when it takes them. It's very calculated. So we may see more slow, incremental progress, but calculated progress that makes big actions or has big shifts and changes rather than doing things for the sake of pleasure or for fun, for instance. Like, it's going to be very specific to an outcome. October 21st, Mercury enters Scorpio. So throughout October, we get to experience Mercury from in Libra and then in Scorpio. So Mercury moves pretty quickly through the zodiac. And on October 21st, when Mercury enters Scorpio, we may experience a lot more psychic and intuitive hits when it comes to our thinking faculties. When Mercury is in Scorpio, it's we're very susceptible to seeing the underlying causes. And we're susceptible to also being a bit more skeptical of the things that we hear and what we see, especially when it comes to on the news or just any information or data that we receive in general. So when Mercury enters Scorpio, we may have a lot more conspiracy theories come up. We might have a lot more suspicious thinking, communications, when we just in the media or between ourselves with each other, what have you. Notice where you are being more skeptical, where you aren't necessarily trusting as much of the things that you're hearing, and just be cautious that you're not falling into the trap of overly suspicious thinking when Mercury is in Scorpio. It's not a bad thing, but if your radar is not attuned well or fine-tuned enough, it can lean into over radical thinking or overly paranoid thinking. So Mercury and Scorpio, be careful that we're not automatically taking things in the negative way or immediately seeing something and just rejecting it because it doesn't feel right or doesn't seem accurate. Mercury in Scorpio is an energy that we have to learn to work with, and it's not something that it comes naturally to everyone. So it's just being discerning of the information, where it comes from, but also considering that we're all under the influence of Mercury and Scorpio's skepticism. October 23rd, we have the Sun ingressing into Scorpio, which starts the new astrological season of Scorpio. And when the Sun moves into Scorpio, all of us in the Northern Hemisphere love to, it's Halloween season. We are connecting with the other side. We're connecting with the depths of ourselves, spirits, the ethereal plane. Scorpio is a sign associated classically with sex, death, and rebirth. So it's this time of unearthing taboos, communicating with the dead, talking to the other side, and also, on another note, is connecting with our ancestors and those that have passed, and having reverence and respect for those that have come before us. Another big shift for us is Pluto turning direct. So Pluto turns direct on October 10th at 27 degrees 54 minutes. The last Pluto return of the United States is during this period. So Pluto is going to station direct, and when it does, it's going to take a couple of weeks up to a month for it to move off of that 27 degree position. So on October 10th, you'll notice some shifts when it comes to your subconscious and the way that you're thinking. Because when Pluto goes direct, it's a time when we are becoming aware of some latent, unearthed, deeper aspects of our being. The Pluto transit is a very long one. It takes years for it to fully integrate and fully bring into our awareness what it actually is doing for us in our lives. So oftentimes it's a stirring, a feeling, a deep, unsettled experience within that we don't necessarily have our finger on until that transit completely lets off. So Pluto goes retrograde, and then we experience the Pluto hit to one particular point in our chart 3 times. When Pluto goes direct, it hits the first time. When it retrogrades, it goes back for the second time. When it goes direct again, it goes for the third time. So it's the law of threes. The first time that something hits is going to be the most impactful, the most abrupt. The second time is going to be the time, the test, essentially, or the reintegration of the lesson of what it is that we're trying to learn. And then the third time is going to be the test to put into action what we've learned from the previous 2 passes. So the United States is going through its last and final Pluto return. And it's not hitting exactly, it's a few degrees or a few minutes, off. It's on the same degree, but a few minutes off. And so it's still happening, though. We're still feeling it. And I know that what's interesting is I'm seeing this trend come up on social media, which is about men and the amount of times that they think about the Roman Empire in a day. And like, hey, it's videos of people asking their partners, how many times do you think about the Roman Empire? And there's usually men. And they'll say, I don't know why. Maybe 3 times. You're like, what? 3 times? No one thinks. No, I do not think about the Roman Empire 3 times a day. That's quite a lot. But the reason why I bring that up is I think it's so appropriate and parallel to this Pluto return, because the United States going through its Pluto return is synonymous with this sort of fall of an empire. And the last time that we experienced it, we did not experience it, but the most impactful was the fall of the Roman Empire. The United States essentially is a continuation of the Roman Empire. There's a lot of the same doctrines and philosophy and political systems that are from the Roman era. And so it's kind of this strange timeline hop that we're in, where we're experiencing the fall of that empire again, but in the United States. So the Pluto is in the United States' 2nd house of money and finance. And we've definitely been seeing and acknowledging how the United States dollar has been going through a huge transition throughout the last couple of years, with its massive rises and massive falls, with inflation being so high, the dollar losing its value significantly. And that makes so much sense. Us astrologers knew this was coming about. With the Pluto in the 2nd house, we also have to consider how the United States uses its power and where its power comes from. And Pluto equals power, literally, which could be associated with oil, gas, even power that you use to generate electricity. But when we think about the USD and how it's asserted its power in the world stage, it's through its backing of oil. And I've been saying this for years, that the United States Pluto return is going to shift, it's going to change the United States standing with the oil trade. And we've been seeing that with many countries who have been teaming up to agree to not use the USD to trade for oil any longer. And I think that this Pluto return, this last and final Pluto return, we will see an end cap to that. And I'm not exactly sure what that means. In the very beginning, to be completely honest, I assumed that at this point we would see a total shift in the way that we used money. And it's slow and steady in terms of like cryptocurrency and digital assets and how those are being integrated with the financial sphere, Uranus and Taurus. But it's changed a little bit. It hasn't changed as much or as rapid as I, to be honest, thought it would. And that might be because of the Uranus and Taurus transit. That might be more so once Uranus is fully out of Taurus that we'll see the implementation of digital assets and digital currency. But one thing is for sure, that the United States standing as the world power when it comes to the United States dollar, the USD, is changing. That's 100% sure. And with the Pluto in the second house of the United States, that's going to be seen so clearly. On a personal level, what Pluto does when it moves into its direct phase is it brings up to surface everything that we had been subconsciously sensing. Pluto helps to transform our habitual patterns. And it also helps us to see where our trauma and pain is creating unhealthy or toxic behavior patterns or addictions in our lives. So when Pluto goes direct, you're going to be very much more aware of those unhealthy patterns and what you need to change in order to overcome any toxic ways of life or being. And that could be anything through your diet, your behaviors, especially with relationships, which is the big theme for October, especially obviously because it's Libra season and we have the eclipses happening in the Libra Aries axis, which is all about our relationships to ourselves, but also to other people, which goes hand in hand, of course. Your relationship to yourself is directly reflected in your relationships to others. Aries, Libra. And so that's what we're going to be seeing is the toxic, and that word toxic, I mean, that's just Pluto. That's the word that we use with Pluto. It's what's toxic, what's disintegrating, or what's creating death and decay within us, the lack of life, or the opposite of living, right? Wherever those toxic patterns lie within relationships and relating to other people, that's going to come up for us, and we're going to have a chance to work on building better, healthy systems in order to not continue on the path of pushing that toxicity or even projecting that out into our relationships and to other people. So let's get to the eclipses. So here is the solar eclipse. It's on October 14th at 10:55 a.m. The sun and the moon will be at 21 degrees, 7 minutes Libra. And the south node will be at 24 degrees, 52 minutes Libra. The main aspects that we see to the moon and the sun is the semi-square to Venus, and in conjunct to Uranus, along with this applying square to Pluto in Capricorn. So it's a pretty intense, for lack of better words, energy, and it's going to bring up so much around our experiences with other people. The new moons represent the beginning of something new, a new cycle. So to me, what this experience will be is an understanding and awareness of what we need to do in order to change, in order to relate better with others, collaborate with others, connect with others. Because yes, there's something to be said about having strong independence and being an independent person, and that's all well and good and noble, but at the end of the day, the purpose of this existence in this life is to understand yourself through other people. It's through connecting with other people. That's where the magic happens. That's where the synchronicities happen. And that's where the work really begins. It's so easy to work on yourself and then deal with your own issues and then not have to integrate that into your relationships and say you're fine, you're good, you did the work, you don't need to do anything else. But it's once you come into contact with another person, you become reflected wholly back at yourself. And everybody reflects different parts of us. And so this new moon in Libra, this solar eclipse, is going to give us an opportunity to see how we can make those fundamental changes with how we see other people, view other people, and change the way that we interact in order to change our lives. When Pluto's involved, it's going to be themes around jealousy, themes around shame and guilt, around how we feel with others. And it's going to be an opportunity to open up with other people regarding those things, and maybe even see how you've been actively pushing people away for the sake of safety and for the purpose of maintaining and managing your vulnerability. The semi-square to Venus is just emphasizing that integration of awareness of the intimate details when it comes to your relationships, and maybe how particular and how specific it is. So it might be just like one specific thing or two specific things that you see and identify for yourself to change. The other thing too with the new moon in Libra is there might be some new relationships coming in for many of us, especially the cardinal signs. The cardinal signs will all be square to this new moon eclipse. So that's Cancer, Capricorn, and Aries. Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, and Libra all may experience a very important and integral relationship that comes up that needs to either be worked on, worked through, or initiated. Really, it's an initiating new experience. So you're here to start the process and not wait for the other person. Also, too, with this solar eclipse is the energy around balancing the karma between you and other people. It might be that you need to apologize. It might be that you receive an apology, or that there is information that comes to you that's a critique or an analysis around you and how you are in relationships that have offended or affected somebody else in a negative way. This is a kind of a time to come to terms with our shadow selves when it comes to the way we integrate and navigate those interpersonal relationships with other people. Libra is a sign of fairness and balance and justice. So further emphasizing that potential for someone coming out of the woodworks, a past relationship, or someone that maybe even wants to apologize to make it right. It's the balancing of karma that comes up during this solar eclipse. It could possibly be that either you or somebody else needs to settle the score or finalize something that has been on their minds or has been on your mind for a really long time. If you've been thinking about calling that person, and if you've been thinking about getting closure, this is probably the time to do it. The next moon that we have is the partial lunar eclipse in Taurus. So the partial lunar eclipse in Taurus is a full moon in Taurus, 5 degrees, 9 minutes. And this one is a emotional roller coaster. I'll just say that. Because we've got the Mercury and Mars opposite Jupiter in Taurus. Mercury and Mars are the passionate fighting words, the intensity of what we're saying, the intensity of the situation, and also with Scorpio, it's what has been remembered for a very long time. So it's things that are coming up from a long time ago, the past. It's unhealed emotions, it's frustration, aggression that is coming back in a big way. This is going to be a pretty, it can be a violent time with Mars opposite Jupiter in general around us. So I would just be cautious with just, especially if you're in a big city. I'm not trying to like spread fear or anything, but just knowing that people are going to be more on edge, are going to be more Mercury and Scorpio, skeptical, a bit suspicious of things, and maybe a little even paranoid. This is cause for radical political agendas to come out, and also radical ideologies around religion, spirituality, and politics. So I think we're going to see a lot of outspoken people who think that they're fighting for a cause, or that they're fighting for the rights of some sort of belief system that they have, that they're extremely passionate about. So watch out for the radicals to come out during this partial lunar eclipse in Taurus on October 28th. Also, though, on a personal level, this is a really abundant time to take those big risks that you've been wanting to take. Mars opposite Jupiter is a time to feel extremely confident in yourself, in taking the leap of faith, in taking the risks that you need to take. And no matter how much it requires that you lose something, but it's like you're comfortable with what needs to be lost in order to gain more. So this could be a really great time to take that leap of faith. To jump forward, to take this energy and use it as motivation to finally maybe walk away from a situation or take on a new risk or a new challenge for yourself. The moon, when it's in Taurus, this is also the quintessential sexuality and sex axis. So we may see too during this time more energy come up around confidence in your sexuality, confidence in expressing your true passionate and pleasure centers, and also connecting with your physical body as well. So this might be a good time to start and initiate something that helps you to feel more pleasurable with yourself, whether it's going on a diet change, a new workout regimen that helps you to feel more sexual and sexy and passionate. The Taurus and Scorpio connections are all about the sensual parts of our being, the sexual exploration too. So this could be a great time to, challenge yourself. Maybe take those courses, take those classes around divine sensuality, and push yourself out there. Push yourself out into the uncomfortable spaces that help you to feel more in line with who you are on a sexual level. Again, because of that, we're going to see probably a lot of opinions and a lot of radical sort of spiritual, religious leanings around sex and sexuality, and a lot of opinions about what it should and shouldn't be. So we might see an uptick as well in the oppositions when it comes to the trans movement, trans, LGBTQ plus, just sex identity and gender politics. I think that'll be a big topic around the partial lunar eclipse in Taurus. Also, aside from that, though, we'll see a lot of women's issues come up too, which oftentimes just gets lumped in general with sex and sexuality, because I don't know why, but for some reason, whenever we think of sex and sexuality, it's just like has to do with feminine. But I think that with the Mars in Scorpio, it would be cool to see some more masculine energy involved when it comes to those topics of sex and sexuality and gender, and maybe a bit more scrutiny around the masculine and what the masculine is or isn't doing to contribute to the evolution of these topics. Because from what I see, a lot of it has to do with women. A lot of it has to do with women, abortion, the mistreatment of women, especially when it comes to sex and sexuality. And oftentimes we don't hear about the masculine side or the man side. And I would like to hear more about that. I would like to hear more men's experiences, men's stories when it comes to sex and sexuality, and not have it all projected onto the feminine constantly. That would be lovely. Let's see, what do we have next? So we have a few big aspects throughout the month. And the first big aspect is through October 2nd to the 4th, where Mercury is going to be opposite Neptune. Venus will be trine the North Node, and Mercury will trine Pluto, and then Mars will be opposite the North Node. So when we see this, with Mercury opposing Neptune and forming this grand Earth trine with Pluto and Uranus, there is, it's hard to fully understand what's going on. It's a very confusing time. And it can feel like there's a lot of things from the past that are becoming present. I kind of use that term a lot. When the past becomes present, it's kind of like when timelines hop or skip, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were here already. Haven't we already dealt with this before? And that's when we see this Mars connection to the South Node. So around the same exact time, Mars coming into the South Node, Mars is the masculine. Mars is the war, passion, action, energy coming out of us. It's our masculine selves, how we initiate ourselves into the world. And that's coming next to the South Node in Libra, which is old ways of doing things, or the relationships of the past, or justices or unfairnesses of the past. So we might see some more Me Too happen with Mars hitting that South Node, and there just might be some reflections happening in our own personal lives where we go back into past relationships and consider maybe what we did was fair or what wasn't fair, and we think about our own actions, but mostly other people's actions, right? Because Libra is about other people. So we're going to be thinking about how other people did us wrong, how other people were affecting us in the relationship, and it could be a little bit of a martyr or woe is me or victim mentality when this Mars hits the South Node. But you will probably see too more men coming back into your life or a past male relationship come back to surface for you to analyze and understand in a different way. You'll definitely see some reoccurring patterns emerge, especially when it comes to your relationships, which are helping to teach you how to deal with confrontations, aggression, or hostile behaviors in others and within yourself. Learning how to express your anger before it turns into resentment is the lesson for this first week of October. Because when Mars is in Libra, sometimes it can be hard to fully express or initiate what we want in life because we're waiting for the other person to make the move. And so when that happens, it's kind of like waiting for someone to read our minds. And that can cause resentment or can cause this just wallflower type behavior where that's what we're trying to work through and understand and become more confident in. So too, with Mars there, old arguments, old frustrations come to surface. Someone might come back and drudge up the past with you, want to talk about things that you thought you had buried. And moving up to October 8th and through the October 10th, we've got Mars squaring Pluto. So now that Mars is coming into a square with Pluto, where we need to take action. Retribution has to be made during this period. Venus is opposing Saturn, which is retrograde. Saturn is retrograde. Pluto is stationing direct around this time too. And then Venus enters Virgo. So there's a lot of discernment, critique, and analysis going around this period of time. There's a strong power dynamic at play, which may feel like we're getting caught in the middle of it. With Venus entering Virgo, we're noticing our values shifting towards prep work for the future and adjusting the ways that we focus our energy and our values. And it's going to be more so towards how we can be more productive. And also with this Mars squaring Pluto, that can be a very abrupt and eruptive kind of day. So this is a day to be cautious of, October 10th. When Pluto makes a square to that, or when Mars makes a square to that Pluto, we might just notice some reactive behaviors, some reactive frustration come up, and some need for, again, retribution during this time. With Venus opposing Saturn, this is actually a really productive time because this is when we really need to see change. We really need to see a new way of navigating and like putting up strong boundaries when it comes to relationships and how people are going to respect us. When Venus and Saturn are in opposition with one another, it's a time when we are trying to navigate and balance what our own personal values are and how to initiate that with other people. So it's learning to communicate what we need from somebody else and it's teaching other people how to respect us better. So that can go both ways. You might come up against a situation where someone pushes back on you or like just kind of hopefully gently, sometimes not so gently, will push back on you and say, no, you can't do that. That's not allowed. That's not appropriate. So you might notice some clashes, especially in relationships, personal relationships, romantic partnerships, business partnerships as well, where there's some blocks, there's some guidelines set in place, there's some rules, some set standards that we have to adhere to. And then moving up until October 19th and the 21st, we have the Mercury conjuncting the Sun. Mercury conjuncting the sun initiates Mercury's transition into evening star phase. So Mercury is morning star for quite some time. And now that Mercury is coming back down into evening star phase, we're going to be able to initiate the information that we had received and learned throughout its morning star phase period. So now that Mercury is in evening star phase around October 19th, 20th, we're using that information in a positive way. And we can see that communications are much more clear, are flowing so much better. And then Mercury squares that Pluto, Sun squares that Pluto, and then Venus trines Jupiter. So when Sun and Mercury are squaring that Pluto, it's again another kind of time of retribution, a time of coming into awareness of our actions and having to kind of find that power from within to fight for something that we believe in, fight for ourselves, and kind of put your foot down with what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Mercury moving into that evening star phase is making it much more easy to talk to others too. It's so much easier to communicate. You might notice that it just flows a lot better, especially in Libra, that you're hearing other people easier and they're listening to you much more clearly as well. It's a really great day to push yourself and be very clear in your communication in order to elevate yourself to another level. When Venus is trine Jupiter, we're going to feel pretty good. We're going to be seeking that feel-good dopamine hit with Venus and Jupiter aspects. But also there's a strong conviction with our judgment and our values too. It's in the earth element, so we can experience some positive shifts when it comes to money. And we might see a little boost in financial income or something that helps us to find a solution for larger financial gains throughout the rest of the year. Jupiter is still retrograde, so this is a period to integrate and instate new systems and new data that we've collected in order to make more money in the future. So this is a good time to set up certain things like for your website, for instance, social media, making those little small incremental changes in order to systematize your processes and also allow yourself to access and receive money easier. Is it hard for people to pay you? Do you have your bank accounts all over the place? Is your money floating in 5 different accounts and it's hard to keep track of it? This is the time to elevate the way that you use your money and resources so that it's easier for people to pay you. October 28th, Mars and Mercury are opposite Jupiter. So this is when we see that exact opposition of Mars with Jupiter, where it was coming into that opposition during this is the eclipse. This is the partial lunar eclipse. So we talked a bit already about this Mars-Jupiter opposition during that time. It's going to hit exact at, let's see, so it's going to hit exact on October 28th at 8 a.m. Pacific time. Actually, it'll be 8:47 a.m. Pacific time. So in the morning of October 28th, right before the full moon, or right before the partial lunar eclipse, full moon in Taurus, we'll have that Mars-Jupiter opposition hit exact. And we may notice some big changes or big kind of explosive information come out around that time. This is going to be connected to the energy of Mars, anything that has to do with Mars, Mars archetype. So that's the hero, that's emergency workers, that's like firefighters, that's anything martial, war, military. And then in Scorpio, it's going to be like secret services, or it's the DEA, or it's also people who work with psychological or psychiatric institutions, and also analytical services as well. Another aspect to this is going to be banking and finance. So we might see some disruptive experiences around banking and the financial industry too. So something to keep your mind on. I don't think it's anything to worry too much about, but you know, the way that we've been seeing all of these huge, like the bank collapse earlier in the year, which was in Taurus season, you know, it affects certain people, it affects certain groups. As long as you're just conscious and aware of where your money is, what it's doing, I just wouldn't be too concerned. Let's see. And then on Halloween, October 31st, we've got Venus trine Uranus. Venus trine Uranus is always a fun time, in my opinion. When Venus trines Uranus, it's like it's a self-exploration moment. It's when we get to experiment with ourselves. We get to explore new ways of doing something. We get to experiment and understand our new skills and traits in a different way and in a different light. Also, Uranus connects us to our relationship to culture and society. So when Venus makes a trine there can feel like a really beautiful camaraderie around that. Maybe there's something that connects you in the work that you do to a group or a group of people. It's Halloween, so a lot of us are going to be celebrating and eating a lot of candy and a lot of sugar. And if you have kids, hanging out, dressing up, changing your look, becoming something different, becoming someone new, which is Venus trine Uranus to a T. So when it comes to, I think, more so work and your relationship to work, yeah, just some fun shifts and changes. You just might experience a pleasant atmosphere, especially with your coworkers and the people you work with. So let's see. I think that's all I've got for you all. October month ahead. It's a big month. We've got a lot going on. Libra always brings in a lot of socializing, a lot of social activity. It's a really busy time for a lot of people, especially in retail, event spaces. We've got so many weddings that oftentimes happens in Libra season appropriately, the season of relationships. So try to harness your energy, use your energy well and wisely, initiate yourself in the types of relationships you want to nurture throughout the rest of the year, and don't be afraid to say no. Well, that is all I've got for you. Thanks so much for joining me with another Astro Month Ahead forecast. I'll be back with another in-depth look at the eclipses, so don't worry, we will definitely take a look at all of those. And if you're not following me on Instagram, I like to post little excerpts and writing that I do on the new moons and full moons, and also other astrological transits, along with hypnosis and just my personal thoughts on the mystical. And with that, have a wonderful month ahead, and I will see you again.